Okay, let's start. Hi, I'm Govan Martin, and I am pleased and amazed to present our wonderful presenter today, Heidi Bryant. Heidi has been a huge influence in my life as she's the one that got me into this work that I do today. So on one hand, it's a blessing, and on the other hand, it's like, oh, what'd you do to me, Heidi? But uh, but I love her so much because in going over this training today, she taught me a lot of new things that, just when you think you know everything, she just throws a whole nother caveat of just great information. So I am so pleased and proud to present not only my friend, but just actually, she is one of the key figures in suicide prevention that started, with her being in Pennsylvania. So Heidi is a Pennsylvania resident, or was, and
Was.
then she was a trader. Now she moved to Wisconsin and cheers on the Green Bay Packers.
I
So,
always like the Packers, I told you. I always
okay,
like the
okay.
Packers.
But yeah, I am. We are so proud to have Heidi aboard, and for what's going to be hopefully an educational training on how to help people who are having thoughts of suicide and how to help attempt survivors and what can we do to make things just a little bit better. So with that, Heidi Bryant.
Okay, I am going to try and share. Okay, here we go. And let me just get started here. When I was practicing this, it didn't do any of this. So, of course, it has to do it when I go live. I'm trying to get rid of these screens for you so they don't interfere. And okay. And the cursor and all this sort of stuff. Sorry, people. Like I said, when I was doing this earlier, no problems. There we go. I do have a poll that I thought I'd try. Oh, and it's not showing. Oh, no. There it is. And my poll lost. I lost it. Oh, no. Okay, never mind. I was going to poll, see what the majority of people, how many were lost survivors, attempt survivors, working with people. I don't know why it isn't launching, but it isn't. So there. So sorry about that. And of course that goes on the wrong screen. Okay, sorry, people.
Well,
all right.
actually, before we start, can everybody write in their name and what organization that they're from, or you're just coming on to see our amazing guest speaker? And then you can actually just type on, are you a loss or attempt survivor? So.
Okay. Well, while they do, I'm going to get started because we have a lot to cover. And you can let me know then what the audience is. How's that?
Sure, that works out.
Okay. When I was doing this, creating this presentation, I was thinking that, well, actually, what I was thinking is that I am 62 years old, and it kind of hit me that I'm 62 years old, and I have been living with suicidal thoughts since I was about 10. I've been diagnosed with anxiety, major depressive disorder, alcoholism, dissociative identity disorder, PTSD. And I'm 62 years old. I made it to 62, and that was not by accident. That was through help from a lot of people, a lot of different sources. And I thought, maybe I should start to share things like what really helped me to get to be this old person. And I wanted to do something different than just, because I figured most of you have seen QPR, and I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to do kind of a broader thing, like how this affects everybody and how that in turn affects you when you want to help the person who's suicidal, and just kind of life skills and things that really helped me to get to be an old person who has struggled with suicide like pretty much almost all my life. So I thought I'd start off with how this impacts everyone, and the emotional impact of a suicide attempt. And I'm going to talk mostly about suicide attempt survivors just because it's easier, but I mean people who, like me, who deal with chronic suicidality, and who or have thoughts, or not necessarily attempted but struggle with the thoughts too. So when, you know, if it's a first attempt for people, a lot of times one of your first responses is anger. I knew a young girl, a young woman was suicidal, and I think they couldn't find her for a while, and they finally found her. She was okay. And her father said he was so angry he wanted to kill her himself. There can be shame, mostly because of the stigma still associated with suicide, betrayal, especially with spouses, disappointment that it got to this, that you could or would do such a thing, that they didn't come to you first, that they didn't feel like they could trust you. Fearful, and fear also makes you react strongly, either with anger, or that you become restrictive and just, or just fearful. There was a mother who would listen to her, go outside her son's bedroom at night and listen to him every night to make sure that he was breathing, that she could hear him breathing, because she was so afraid. Frustration, you're upset, or you might not feel anything at all. You know, you just might be numb. And also this powerlessness and helplessness, a lack of control. And these are also, I want to point out, associated with trauma, because I believe suicide attempts and suicide deaths are traumatic events and should be treated as such, and that there's definitely an element of trauma in them. If someone has repeated more than once, it's the same emotions as the first time, but now they're also kind of bumped up several notches. The frustration is greater. You could be, you know, what am I doing wrong? How did it get here? What is it that I'm not getting? Like, how can this be happening again? Will this ever stop? You know, so the fear, the disappointment, frustration is just at a much higher level. And, you know, or maybe if they are hospitalized for a while, you might feel relieved because they're safe for a while, and for, you know, you have a break. And that these are all natural reactions to this. I knew a woman who her daughter attempted twice, and after the second attempt, she took the door off her bedroom door. She monitored she screened every phone call. She drove her to appointments and classes and picked them up, and she became totally restrictive, which was actually, you know, counterproductive. It made the attempt survivor feel trapped and raised her level even more. But she was afraid. She was trying to do what she could to help her daughter. Suicide and suicide attempts don't happen in a vacuum. So there's this tremendous ripple effect that, you know, it's the family, it's the distant family, it's coworkers, it's friends, it goes on and on and on. But the good news is that suicide prevention and hope also have ripple effects. So they spread too when you have that. It impacts the family. It's for parents, they often feel, you know, parents want to fix things. They want to protect their children from bad things. So they often feel like they've failed. They can feel the guilt. I should have seen it coming. Well, we know that a lot of times, you know, parents are the last to know. confusion, not helpless, devastated. Like how did it get to this? How did it happen? It can also have an impact on children. And while they may not have seen the event, and of course, all this depends on the child and the circumstances, they may not have seen anything, but they can still sense that something has gone on, there's something wrong at home. And they don't have effective ways of communicating that, though, so their behavior may change. They may become more clingy. They may lose some of their speech or toileting skills. They may have difficulty with sleep. Either they're afraid to go to sleep, or they have nightmares, or they don't want to sleep alone. As they get older, they can develop feelings of guilt and shame. Especially if they have that in that age of magical thinking where, well, maybe if I had done my homework, she wouldn't have done that. Or, like maybe if if I'd been better, this wouldn't have happened. And again, they may not have the skills to emote or express their emotions, so they may have sleep disturbances, difficulty concentrating or learning at school, somatic complaints such as headaches, belly aches, stomach aches, that kind of thing. And then feelings of fear or vulnerability and concerned about being labeled as they get older, being different from their peers can also cause them to then develop more aggressive behavior or withdraw from their friends, or even develop self-destructive or accident-prone behaviors. One of the biggest impact on spouses is a sense of betrayal. Trust will have to be restored and rebuilt. The spouse is angry and hurt, and just, how could they do this to me? Weren't you thinking of me or of the family? Don't you love us? Don't they know what this would do to us? How could they leave us this way? What, you'd rather be dead than be with me? So, and they may feel alone and depressed and isolated too, because of the stigma. They might not feel like they can talk about this with anyone. Siblings often feel neglected. I'm hurting too, but all your attention's going to the other person, which is understandable, but you can't forget that there are siblings, that there are other siblings too. Maybe they feel guilty. Maybe the sibling told them something and they didn't come to you with that, and then they attempted. They need to know that, this in the future you have to come to us, but it's understandable. They may feel awkward, not know how to talk to the sibling who attempted, and feel like, well, what if I set them off? Will they do it again? And resentful. They may feel like, I'm feeling like crap too, but he's getting all the attention. Or maybe they feel like the attempt survivor is manipulating the parents or the situation. There's a whole array of emotions that or impact that this can have on the family and friends and cousins and aunts and uncles and co-workers. But the attempt survivor has, it has an impact on the attempt survivor as well. They can feel angry or disappointed. My mother was hospitalized when I was in, I think, first grade, and she would always talk about how the woman next to her was a young woman who was in high school who had just woken up from a suicide attempt. And my mother would always talk about how horrible it was to witness that how she cried and wailed and didn't want to live, and that it was just an awful thing to have witnessed that. And the poor woman should have been alone, or something. Guilty or ashamed. They might feel, I can't even kill myself, right? I mean, I am such a failure. They might withdraw, might not want to be seen by anyone, especially if they're being monitored very closely, or they may just go numb and not feel anything at all. But the one, and even though each person will react differently and have their own response to attempted suicide, it's, guilt is a pretty universal reaction that everyone experiences. But what I want to talk about, though, is how much of it is guilt and how much of it is shame. I feel as though shame is a huge topic that we don't give enough attention to. I was in my therapist's office, and he once time made this offhand remark like, "Oh, I can't even say that because you're so shame-based." And it was something good. It wasn't something bad. It was something good. And I was like, "Well, what?" And he just said, "No, I can't. You can't handle it. I know you can't handle it." And I never did find out what it was, but it got me thinking. Now, I'm sure he's mentioned shame before, but like only now am I able to hear it. And so I started to research it more and learn about it more. And I realized that, wow, he's right. I really am shame-based. And it's really had a huge role in my journey. But what is the difference between shame and guilt? Shame hinges on the self. Shame is about the person, whereas guilt is more about a triggering behavior or attribute. Shame is I am bad, whereas guilt is I did something bad. Shame is often associated with more painful feelings, often lashing out or escaping. Guilt is associated with less painful emotions, remorse, regret, wanting to make things better, apologizing, making amends. It used to be thought that you could motivate people with healthy shame, and research has shown that there is no such thing as healthy shame. Guilt is a motivating emotion, but shame is not. I also thought I want to talk more about the distinction between embarrassment, humiliation, guilt, and shame. Embarrassment is fleeting, and it eventually becomes funny. You tell stories about it. I've often told a story where I fell in the middle of a busy street in Westchester. I had a armful of folders. They went everywhere, and I picked them up, and a man came over and he said, are you okay? Did you hurt anything? And I said, only my dignity, and walked away. I was embarrassed. Humiliation is we feel like we don't deserve it, so it evokes anger, and therefore we talk about it. We share it with other people. Guilt, as I said, motivates us. We feel we did something wrong or that we can remedy, so we try to make amends, we apologize, we change our behavior. But shame is we feel we deserve it. We believe we're bad, we're flawed, we're defective, we're unworthy. And because of that, we stay silent. And it leads to self-destructive behaviors. It's associated with, not being good enough, not feeling like, enough. And who do you think you are that you are even trying to do this? It's also, how do I compare to others, and what are the areas I compare myself? Am I perceiving myself as unstable, an addict, weak, lazy? And if so, that in and of itself will evoke shame. And it dictates how we think and feel and behave every day. Experiences of shame tend to be intense and overpowering because they evoke that feeling of being bad, worthless, unlovable, or even contemptible. It's often associated with a sense of powerlessness, sensations of shrinking, feeling small, being exposed, wanting to disappear. In fact, our bodies react to shame before our conscious minds do. There's the fight, flight, and freeze response is activated before our mind does. And it doesn't like words. It doesn't like to be talked about. It likes to stay hidden. And that's why it's like secrecy, silence, and judgment. And that's why we don't talk about it. And it's even avoided in everyday language. And because it's linked with a desire to hide and conceal, feelings of shame stay hidden. is this not? And I think my screen just, there we go. Sorry, my screen just froze. I don't believe this.
Why are you trying to fix it, Heidi? I don't know if you can.
It's not what, no.
Oh, okay. We do have a question. Maybe you could try and do both. But somebody asked, Darlene asked, what are your thoughts on using psychedelic-assisted therapy for treatment of anxiety and depression?
All I know really is that it is being looked into. The FDA has authorized a trial. They've used psychedelic drugs. They've tried that in the past. I think it all depends on the context and how you administer it, and if you administer it in a safe environment, it's helpful. But other than that, I don't know much more about it. And this is really.
And Darlene says it will be approved by the FDA in 2021.
Yeah, it's not something that I personally would do because I am a recovering alcoholic. So, and I want to stay away from anything like that. But it'll be interesting to see how it helps and how it works.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I cannot get this to work. So I'm going to stop my share for a minute and see what else I can do. And I apologize. Like I said, this has not happened in the past.
Somebody else mentioned that Philly's supposed to be opening a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy program this summer. So thank you, January. And eventually somebody asked, Linda asked, are we going to receive copies of these slides?
Yes. If you send me your email or GoVan, we can make sure that they are available after the presentation. Sorry. You know how many times I practice this? I am not kidding. I practice this, and I practiced it as a webinar so that nothing like this would happen. And of course it does. So let's try this again.
Sue says, I see an error. Handshake failed on my screen. Okay.
Now let me see if I can. And it goes dark, doesn't it? Okay. Oh, God. I am so sorry, people. I swear to God.
Maybe you just do it like that.
Okay. I guess so. I hate doing this. You know what? Let me try one more thing, okay?
Okay.
Okay. And let me see if I do this, if it still turns black. And it does. Okay. All right, I have to do it this way. Okay. And I don't know where I am, so I have to go up. Okay, that's where it was. Shame. Brene Brown noted that shame proneness is strongly correlated with depression, addiction, eating disorders, self-harm, bullying, aggression, violence, and suicide. And it's, again, she said it's that intensely powerful feeling or experience of believing that we're flawed and therefore unworthy. It's influenced by culture, and it as Brene Brown says, it erodes the part of us that thinks we can change. There is an antidote to shame, and that is empathy. Empathy allows us to take perspective of the situation, to stay out of judgment, recognizes emotions, and communicate our understanding of that person's feelings. And what this does is enables the person to be able to talk about it, to finally get that shame out in the open, and to recognize it and work with others to help decrease it. Brene Brown adds mindfulness to the attributes of empathy, and says that it's the ability to perceive a situation from another person's perspective, to see, hear, and feel the unique world of the other person. So I want to talk a little bit more about empathy. People are more likely to want to change and open up if they feel understood. Lack of empathy shuts a person down, and it leads to silence and secrets, and it helps a person to feel validated and heard. And there was a radio program that surveyed its listeners, and they said they knew they were loved and when they felt they were heard. So it's certainly is a trait you want to have. But how can you have empathy for the suicidal person? How, because especially if you're not suicidal, it might be difficult to understand how did they get there? What happened? And to recognize that they are in intense psychological pain, that they genuinely believe you'd be better off without them, that the only way they can end their pain is to end their life, that there's no hope, they're a burden, and the only solution is to end their pain is to end their life. So they don't necessarily want to die, they want to end their pain. So if you can have some empathy for the suicidal person, recognizing that they're in a great deal of pain, and be able to understand and see how they got there, but without judgment. And if you can also try not to interfere or correct their thinking. And I'm not saying you want them to do it. I'm not saying that you want them to go ahead and proceed to kill themselves. What I am saying is that for a lot of people, myself included, thinking about suicide or having that, it was an out for me. If things got too bad, I could always kill myself. So for a lot of people, it's a coping mechanism. It's a tool that we use to help relieve our pain. And also think about times when you're sharing something with someone, and you start to share and they say, oh, don't feel that way, or how can you feel that way, or what would help with that? What does that do? That shuts it down, that you immediately don't want to continue talking about that. So empathy is trying not to correct it, but trying to just hear it and listen to it. It doesn't mean you condone it, the wishes or the thinkings. It just means that you are willing to build a relationship, or as David Jobs calls it, a therapeutic alliance with someone, a connection, being a companion during a time of crisis. It creates an atmosphere of trust and lessens the person's sense of isolation and disconnection. But you want to be genuine, and you want to express why it's important that you want the person to live, and because it can't be faked. And people will know when you're not being sincere. There are roadblocks to empathy. You have to pay attention and you have to listen. You have to be willing to sit comfortably with a very uncomfortable topic. And for a lot of people, they don't know. They also are afraid, I'm going to say the wrong thing. Like they have to have this perfect response, but you don't. You just, you just have to be there and be a friend, or just open yourself up to being able to hear it without judgment. there is cognitive empathy, which is when you can't feel what the person's feeling, but you know intellectually that you need to communicate as empathetically as possible. So what you can do is, you know, sometimes that's all you can do. It's, you know, as long as you can do it and let the person know that, you know, I can't feel what you're feeling. I just can't, but I'm doing my best to understand it. And I think I do. So I think I understand what you're feeling, and, you know, maybe that will help. Another barrier to empathy is like what I call the trump card. You know, when you start to share something and then somebody says, yeah, well, I know you have it bad, but it was really bad this time for me when, or you start sharing about your experience and they turn it into their experience. That's another roadblock to empathy.
Hey, Heidi, somebody commented, can you move the slides? Apparently it's stuck on the antidote to shame right now. Or go to the current
I
slide.
have been.
Okay, yeah, it's not showing.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Let me just throw one question at you. Somebody said, El Asensio said, thank you, Heidi, for courageously sharing your experience with us. I don't think you mentioned the genetic connection, meaning how families feel knowing a relative's suicide can mean they are at a higher risk themselves.
Oh, no, I didn't. You're right. I mean, I think there is. I think you're also, if you're exposed to suicide, you become more of, it's also a risk factor. So I don't even know for sure how genetic, you know, if it's genetic or if it's environmental, but there is a definite connection. So.
And also, you're getting lots of comments saying, "Don't worry, you're doing a great job," and
oh, God bless
to
you.
go ahead with you know, just talking. So we're good.
Oh, thank you, people. You're so nice. Because I'm trying. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I want to tie this back into the when I talked earlier about the emotional reactions that people have, because that, you know, that ties into how you then interact with the person who's suicidal. You know, that could be a roadblock to empathy. And I always like to include the attempt survivor too, because, you know, we can self stigmatize. We can, you know, shame ourselves and have shame. So, you know, we have roadblocks to our own empathy, which I'm going to go into later. And now I'm having trouble advancing this slide. Honest to God. I will try this one more time. You get a blank screen, don't you? Okay. Yeah.
Patty Dilly asked, "What helped you?"
Okay.
That's a big question.
Sorry, I'm just
While you're working. That's
yeah,
okay.
trying to fix this for us, which of course it's not working. Talking about being able to talk about it with my, did anything happen there for you guys?
No.
Okay, I lost my ability to see Zoom, so I don't know what's going on.
We still see you.
Okay, but I wanted to do a new shares. Okay.
Okay.
See, I'll just keep trying until I give up. I can't believe this. Now it stopped again. Okay. Thing is, I need the presentation too, so I'm waiting.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah.
Uh,
If you can see it on your own, then you can just go ahead and talk, and
yeah, but I
we can
can't
send the slides.
advance my slides. So
Gotcha.
that's the problem I'm having is I can't do anything right now. So do you see, you still see me, but you get a blank screen, right?
Right.
So if I stop the share,
We see just both of us.
okay, maybe that's what I gotta do. And of course now I can't get to anything. Okay. Oh God. What helped me is a lot of things. I mean, discovering about shame and being able to talk about that. Being able to talk about when I'm suicidal with my husband or trusted friend is huge. When I start to go down that rabbit hole, that I can talk to someone, that I've recognized my own triggers. I've recognized, when something's off, and I talk about it right away. Therapy has definitely helped. I needed medication for my depression in order that I could tackle the issues. So these are the things that help me. So I'm going to just go a little bit more. I am so sorry, people, but I will send you slides. We will make sure that you get the slides. Well, the other roadblocks I want to think of is how you react. Like, well, if it were, they're crazy, or do you think of it's a sin? That kind of thing. That you have to be aware of your own reactions and your own feelings when you're dealing with someone who's suicidal. And so if you are having a strong reaction, like, is your first impulse to take them to the hospital? Or to try and control their behavior? You need to ask yourself, what is, why? Have I been suicidal? Have I lost someone to suicidal? What is it that is triggering this strong reaction? Because this will impede in my helping them. And once you can recognize that, you can deal with it. Another way to I thought could increase empathy is to help is to recognize some of the thinking that is that suicidal people have in common. And there are some common characteristics that people have, and one of them is cognitive distortions. And cognitive distortions are simply ways that our mind convinces us of something that isn't really true. They're inaccurate thoughts and usually used to reinforce negative thinking or emotions. And we keep telling ourselves things that sound rational and accurate, but really only serve to make us feel bad about ourselves. So there are 11 common distortions. One is all or nothing thinking. So you view situations on one extreme or the other instead of on a continuum. You see things in black and white categories. If you either do it perfectly or you don't bother at all. Another one is catastrophizing, which you predict only negative outcomes for the future. If I got a C on my test, so that means I'm going to fail the class. That means I'm going to lose my scholarship. That means I'm going to be kicked out of college. That means I'm going to fail. That means my life is over. Just taking it, to that level. Disqualifying or discounting the positive, telling yourself that good things that happen don't really count. You reject positive experiences by insisting they don't count for some reason or the other, and that helps you to maintain a negative belief that's contradicted by your everyday experiences. I was in the top 10% of my class, but it was a really, really small class, so it doesn't really mean anything. Emotional reasoning, which is like feelings equals facts. So feeling about something overrules the facts to the contrary. So if I feel stupid, I must be stupid. It's that belief that acts will influence unrelated situations. I'm a good person, so bad things shouldn't happen to me. Labeling, giving someone or something a label without finding out any more about them. It's an extreme form of overgeneralization. Someone who drops their children off at daycare every day, you know, maybe someone says she abandons her children to total stranger. It's, you know, instead of describing your error, you attach a negative label to yourself. So you make a mistake, I'm a loser. If it's someone else's behavior that rubs you the wrong way, you attach a negative label to him or her. But, you know, it's like he's an idiot. And these labels are usually very highly colored and emotionally charged. You can make mountains out of molehills, emphasizing the negative or downplaying the positive. You exaggerate the importance of things such as your mistake or someone else's achievement, or you inappropriately shrink things until they seem tiny, such as your desirable qualities or other proposed imperfections. A mental filter or tunnel vision. This is placing all your attention on the negatives of a situation or seeing only the negatives of a situation. You pick out a single negative detail and dwell on it exclusively so that your vision of all reality becomes darkened, kind of like a drop of ink that discolors the entire beaker of water. Mind reading, that's where you believe you know what others are thinking, or you interpret their thoughts and beliefs. You interpret the thoughts and beliefs of others without any kind of evidence. You jump to conclusions. She wouldn't go on a date with me, so she must think I'm ugly. It's just this expectation that a situation will turn out badly. You know, you just know it's going to be bad. Or I called them and left them a message and they didn't get back to me. They must be mad at me. Overgeneralization is when you make an overall negative situation beyond the current situation. So you see a negative event as a never-ending pattern. Like, nothing ever works out the way I want it to. I can never catch a break. You know, you never call when you're going to be late. You always do this to me. Personalization, thinking the negative behavior of others has something to do with you. My daughter came home from school today, barely said a word. I wonder if she's mad at me. I wonder what I did to her to upset her. You know, it can not be about yourself at all, about you. It's about her, whatever happened to her at school or something. But you tend to blame yourself. Everything's your fault. Should and must statements. You have a concrete idea of how people should behave. If I should get all A's to be a good student. You try and motivate yourself with shoulds and oughts and musts and shouldn't, as if you have to be whipped or punished before you can be expected to do anything. And the emotional consequences, guilt and shame. And then when you direct these statements towards others, you feel anger and frustration and resentment. Cognitive rigidity, or not being able to, a resistance to change in beliefs or attitudes or value. You're feeling locked into your current perceptions and unable to imagine alternatives or consider a new course of action. And perfectionism. And Brene Brown has said that perfectionism is the birthplace, that shame is the birthplace of perfectionism. And it's, you know, of self and others. It's associated with very high levels of self-criticism. And perfectionism can increase suicide ideation by creating stress, accentuating the adversity of stress, and focusing people's attention on their flaws or failures rather than their strengths or successes. And impaired autobiographical memory. You can only remember when things didn't work out. You can't remember all the times that they did work out. You can only remember the bad times. Poor problem-solving ability, low confidence in problem-solving ability. It's called a looming vulnerability. Suicidal and anxious people are prone to produce elaborate mental scenarios where the risk rises rapidly with multiple increasing threats, and the timeline shortens so that they exaggerate this, and this time course of a perceived catastrophic outcomes, and so they develop an increased sense of urgency for escape and avoidance. Like, I can't fix this problem, so I should just die. And that's also demonstrates tunnel vision and rigidity in thinking and generating alternatives. Reasons for dying outweigh reasons for living. You view death in a more favorable light. You're more present oriented. My husband was on life support, and I genuinely did not know if he was gonna live or die. And each time I left him, he was at Penn, and I called my therapist because I said, if he dies, I have no safety. I'm afraid of what I'm gonna do if he dies. And we had an emergency session, and it turns out that, I couldn't imagine a life beyond his death. Like, I was stuck there. I stopped. And so he helped me to see, like, let's see what the day would look like next day, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. And that helped me to be able to see the future, because at that time I was totally incapable of doing so. A perceived benefit of suicide, sometimes there's a revenge in there. People who hurt me will be sorry. And there can also be an absence of protective factors, such as a sense of moral, of personal self-efficacy, moral or religious objections to suicide, fear of self-injury, and sense of responsibility to one's family. So that's it for cognitive distortions. Any questions or? Just continue. I can't hear you, Govan.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. So let me give you some compliments. Mark Davis, apparently you must know Mark Davis because he is totally infatuated in love with you. And he said to your husband not to get jealous. But yeah, so it's lengthy, so I won't read it, but just wanted to let you know that he's in love with you. So Kathy Wallace said your comment that it was very helpful to be able to talk to someone was very meaningful. What is your opinion about suicide attempt support groups?
I tried I had Suicide Anonymous going on for years, and no one would show, except for like 3 people. I mean, it just didn't work. I tried to develop a suicide attempt support group. I have the format for it. I have one that accompanies it for the families. I believe that, I think certified peer specialists would be ideal to run them. I know Dee Dee Hirsch has developed one, and I believe Western Mass in New England has one too. They're just so few and far between, and I know people are afraid of them, but I think I wish we had them, and I wish we had them everywhere, because I think that that's extremely helpful to hear from other people who are going through the same thing, what works for them, to know you're not alone, to not be judged. I wish we had them.
Well, I will ask a question then to the follow-up that one. Is there any way that you could train people to run a suicide support group?
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I developed mine, and I had a training, but it never took off. Dee Hirsch has one that you can hire people to learn to facilitate, and I think the Western Mass one also.
Well, how about if we bring you back to PA to run a training?
Any excuse for me to come to PA? Absolutely. No, I would be honored. I'd love that. I would love to give it a go.
That is one of our, I think right now there's only one going on in Pennsylvania, and it's on the outskirts of Philly right now. But as you said, they're few and far between, not only in Pennsylvania, but in the country. So we would love to bring you back to PA to do that. So
thanks. Yeah, I would. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. If you had another comment on it, go ahead.
No.
Okay. The other question was, do you recommend approaching a person about your concerns if you feel they are suicidal? Good question.
It depends on the context. I mean, obviously privacy. Do you have time? Because if they say they are you prepared to handle that? But yes, I absolutely. I mean, what I love about suicide prevention is that it's not rocket science. What it really is permission to be a good, kind, caring person. That's really all it is. So I think anytime you want to show someone that you care about them, it's a good thing, and that's ultimately what you're doing. So I mean, and because you have no idea what gesture, the smallest gesture can mean the world to someone. And I'll give you an example. I was having a really crappy day. I had a headache. I came home from work. It was just a really crappy day. I was starting to spiral. I was not in a good mood. And that weekend, my husband and I he was teaching at a school. We went to this concert, and I wanted to buy a lollipop, and they said, "Oh, sorry, it's just for the students." I said, "No big deal." And I'd forgotten about it. So a couple of days later, I'm having this crappy day, and I come home, and on the counter is like this kind of like bouquet of Tootsie Pop, that and I said to my husband, "What's this?" And he said, "The woman who said you couldn't have a Tootsie Pop, couldn't buy one, her daughter's in my class, and so she felt bad, so she gave her daughter this to give to you, so that," and it was just a stupid, lollipops, but my mood changed instantly. That a stranger would care that much about something and remembered it, it was huge, so that's the other thing, is a random act of kindness can also be an act of suicide prevention.
Yeah, it's, if you haven't taken QPR or any assist training, we really highly recommend that you do so, and it'll teach people how to actually ask that question. So obviously that's really important on how to do and when to do it. So we would love to see you in future QPR trainings or assist trainings if you haven't had them. And just to let you know, Heidi, there has been a round of people saying they want you to come back. So so we'll have to arrange that in the aftermath. So
you guys are so great. You're being so understanding about the slides, and I have to say I really spent a lot of time on these slides.
Oh, I know you did.
And I'm upset that no one can see them, but lesson I had to learn somehow, I guess. So
that's okay. So you're doing great. So for those who want to ask more questions, can you go on the bottom of your screen and go through the Q&A part? And that way I won't miss it in the chat, just in case there's a flood of people actually asking questions.
Are you talking to me or them?
No, I'm talking to the
okay.
everybody. So okay. So go ahead. You can go ahead, Heidi. I think so. If you have
Okay.
questions, please actually go into Q&A and ask them there. Great. Thank you.
And the next section I just want to talk a little bit about is ambivalence, and this that, Edwin Schneidman said that common cognitive state of suicide is ambivalent, and that he believed that people were ambivalent up until the very moment of their death. And, they wish to die and wish to be rescued simultaneously. So I just want to stress the ambivalence, that it's not necessarily that people want to die, they want to end their pain. And the only way they know how to end their pain is to end their lives. So it's something to capitalize on. You'll find it as you talk to them. You can usually discover it. Oh yeah, when I had the Suicide Anonymous group, this one woman was a regular, and we became close. We became friends. And one time she came in and she said, they found a lump in my breast. And she said, and I have to go back and get further tests. And she said, it's really strange. Like, I'm really afraid that I might have breast cancer and that I might die. But here I am at a Suicide Anonymous meeting because I have these deaths of wanting to kill myself. So I thought that was just this perfect illustration of the ambivalence we can feel. So, and if you take QPR, you will understand, you'll be told how to help someone, like with restricting access to lethal means, medication, don't let them dispense it themselves, knives, don't forget knives, razors, poisons, all sorts of things. So I'm not going to go into that as much because, well, for one thing, we're running time, and the other thing is, I know Prevent Suicide PA offers QPR sessions, so if you haven't had it, I strongly recommend you do. Ursula Whiteside has a great website, Now Matters Now, and she has developed this kind of a stop, drop, and roll, and that helps people when they are facing in the crisis, when they have this sudden urge or this urge to kill themselves. And the first step is to reset it, which is like go to sleep, or but don't take anything for sleep, or take a cold shower, or stick your face in ice water for 30 seconds or something to reset the button. And then next is to commit to not making any decisions. Don't make the decision to kill yourself. Don't make any kind of decision at all, or especially anything that wants you to kill yourself. And stop taking drugs and alcohol if you are. And then the third one, and this might be the most important one, is make eye contact. Making eye contact with someone has been proven to be a great pain reducer. So she says, keep at it till you get someone. If it's a virtual chat, doesn't matter. Make direct eye contact with someone, ask them if they can help you. And actually what they say and things isn't as important as the making of the eye contact. And, I feel like this is all about me, but I want to give you examples of things that helped. I've had PTSD, and sometimes therapy can get intense. And there was one time when it was getting pretty intense, and my therapist did two things. And the first thing he did is, he said my name, which kind of started to shake me out of it, because, usually there's no need to say my name. And the second thing he said is, look at me. And he look at me. And doing so, kind of brought me back and calmed me down and helped me. So I Now Matters Now has great videos and tips and things. I really recommend you visit that if you need help. It's a great tool. Safety plan developed by Greg Brown and Barb Stanley is just a way that you can help yourself to learn your triggers, how can I help myself internally? What self-soothing techniques can I use? If that doesn't work, what can I do externally? Can I go to a coffee shop and sit there for a while, or can I meet friends? Then who can I talk to? Do I have friends who are trusted people I can talk to? Mental health professionals or places I can call if that doesn't work, if I need it. And how can I keep myself safe? What do I need to do to make myself as safe as possible? But I would also add, and I have a template for a safety plan, and I have at the bottom of it because, and this is from Marsha Linehan, what do I need to have to what's the most important thing in my life to keep me living? What is it that I need to have a life worth living? Because if, as Marsha Linehan would say, if you don't have a life worth living, you're not going to want to live your life. So what makes my life worth living? Some other tools are Hope Box. You can, speaking of suicide.com with Dr. Stacy Friedenthal has describes the evidence base around this, and her website is also a huge, great asset and tool for people to look at. I would strongly recommend that one too. But a Hope Box is just, you have letters or printed emails or Bible verses or poems that mean a lot to you, that are uplifting, photos of special friends, vacations, things, inspirational quotes, articles that are meaningful, jokes that make you laugh, anything that reminds you of reasons to stay alive. And it's really empowering if you and the attempt survivor can do it together too. It's a great activity. And you might think that it sounds hokey, but people, it has great success, and it's really helpful, and people like doing it. There's a virtual app. There's a virtual Hope Box. There are things called coping cards where you and the virtual Hope Box has coping cards included, where you have a problem behavior or thought, and then you have the challenge on the other side. So if I think I am unlovable, then on the other side of that, I would have people who I know love me. So you challenge it, but you need to practice them so that you use them when you need them. So they should be practice. Mood Tools has a great app that you can download. It has a thought diary, a depression test, coping card, safety plan, all sorts of activities and things with great instructions. SAMHSA has a booklet you can download called Journey Toward Hope and Health or something like that. I always forget. But it's a workbook for attempt survivors. Attempt survivors were instrumental in creating that workbook, so I would recommend that one. There's a thing, I'll just show them since I don't have slides. I don't know if you can see it, called strength cards. They're at my best, and they're pretty cool. Like on one side you might have a funny picture, and then on the other side, and this is probably backwards for you, but it says humorous. So you use them either by alone or with a group of people. What are times that I've used humor to help me through something, or when have I been humorous or something? And it's a great positive psychology tool, and you can get this at mybest.com. And another technique is emotional field therapy, I believe it's called, EFT or tapping. And it's a powerful holistic healing technique that has been proven to be effective against a range of issues. It's based on the combined principles of ancient Chinese acupressure and modern psychology. And it helps you focus on a negative emotion, and you tap on these pressure points with that emotion and for several times, and it really helps you to release the intensity of that. I have PTSD, and had dissociative identity disorder. I didn't have full-blown personalities, but I would dissociate. So I don't have specific memories all the time. And my mother was in the hospital and I was supposed to go visit her. And my oldest brother called and he shared a memory of our other brother who died by suicide that triggered a flashback for me that was bad. And I had to go visit my mom, and I am like bending over, wanting to vomit, shaking, crying, and I have to just, and so I called my therapist and he instructed me on a tapping technique. He walked me through it on the phone. Thank God he was there. And I was able to do that. And you know what? I was able to leave in like 15 minutes. I went and left my mom and I was okay. So I strongly recommend that also. Dr. Kristen Neff has a website, self-compassion. I think it's org. And she talks about self-compassion a lot and how we learn to treat ourselves the same way we would treat others. It's like the common humanity versus isolation. We notice our own suffering, especially when it comes from our own self-judgment and self-criticism. And, can we be compassionate with ourselves, or are we going to go straight into problem-solving mode? Can we, comfort and soothe ourselves? Can we be open-hearted towards ourselves? Use kind, caring, soothing language and not harshly critical of or judgmental of ourselves. To learn to accept ourselves. And because you care about yourself, you want yourself to be happy. And she even recommends like physical gestures such as rubbing or soothing or hugging yourself, and that in fact, those release oxytocin, which is that, feel-good hormone. And the other point she makes is the other good news is that you're always there for yourself. You're there 24/7. If you need help, you'll be there. And it's just this common humanity that the very definition of human means that, you're going to make mistakes. You're vulnerable. You're imperfect. So compassion involves recognizing that suffering. It's part of the shared human experience and something that we all go through rather than something that happens to me or you alone. And she adds mindfulness to this so that you don't get stuck in that rigid, that rigid thinking, or go down that tunnel vision, or be unable to see in the future kind of thing. It's just you have this non-judgmental, receptive mind state that observes your thoughts and feelings, and you don't attach any judgment to it, and you don't ignore your pain, but you can feel compassion for it at the same time. And so that, you're not swept away by the negativity. Any questions or continue?
Yep, we have a lot of questions. First question, I think this is the one we definitely want to answer right now. It says, how can you handle when your 16-year-old says he wants to kill himself?
Well, I think you're doing the right thing by asking that question. And I mean, I would find some kind of therapy for the family and your 16-year-old and yourself, but I would also talk to him. Somebody once said, so I take my kid for ice cream, and over ice cream I ask him why he wants to kill himself, and the answer was yeah. Find ways, try not to be judgmental, try not to freak out. It's scary. I know one's afraid they're going to die, but, if you recognize it and let them talk about it, and then find ways to help them, like, how can we do to get you, what can we do? But I would definitely also find a therapist who is knowledgeable in suicide and also with teenagers. So I hope that helps.
April asks, what is your suggestion for families that are struggling with processing or coping with a family member who has died by suicide.
Uh, yeah. Talk about it. Talk about amongst yourselves. There's a tendency to not talk about it. I can't tell you how many years it took me till someone mentioned my brother Jeff's name. Therapy. There are support groups for survivors of suicide loss. I would recommend that. Find people who've lost someone to process it. There's a lot of great books, which of course now I'm blanking on. But it's a long journey. You will learn to forgive yourself because it wasn't your fault, and be gentle with yourself. Self-care. Don't forget self-care. That's really important at a time like that.
Well, I just want to mention, Heidi, that you were instrumental actually in getting to talk about my brother, because you're really the first survivor I talked to after 20 some years. And because you talked about it actually in some meeting that was supposed to be a 5-minute conversation in the parking lot turned into 2 hours. So I know that was just so healing for me. And so it's, again, I think if it's done the right way, lost survivor groups are really great. Yeah. You can go through our website, preventsuicidepa.org, and if you look up our task force page, underneath, if you scroll through near the bottom of those county task forces, that you'll find lost survivor groups. In most counties, lost survivor groups aren't in every county in Pennsylvania, but you can usually find one in a neighboring county. If one doesn't work, go to another. And as Heidi said, therapy, and it's finding the right therapist. If you don't like the one you're going to, go to another one.
And ask. I mean, if you're looking for therapy, ask if they've, either if they've had other patients who've lost someone to suicide. Just ask.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't be shy and try and find the best person for you that's going to be able to help you. And let's see here. We'll get you one more question, then we'll go on. Can Heidi, Rachel said, can Heidi address specifically what support people for someone who's made several attempts might need to know?
Yeah, this is always a tough one, and I don't have a good answer. It's so hard, and I really don't. Again, I recommend therapy for the family, for to deal with it. If you can find support groups, NAMI's family to family. It's kind of like it dealing with an alcoholic who can never get the program, who never gets sober, and who doesn't get it. It's heart-wrenching. It's hard. There are hardly any support groups for attempt survivors. There's just nothing out there for people who have repeated attempts. I wish I had more for you.
The only suggestion that I might make with that is that hopefully you have your own support group network, and talk about how you feel in that supportive environment, and stay safe. That's like, for people who are struggling, we don't want to put them in unsafe environments and unsafe people. So we want to make sure that for them to feel free, or anyone who's lost somebody or who have attempted, that they should be talking to people that they feel comfortable and safe with. But that, as Heidi stated, that's a really hard question, because there aren't a lot of environments where people can open up right now who have attempted before. But there is therapy, and hopefully there are people out there that will talk to you. And if you don't have anybody, you can write to us, and we'll try and find you the best help that we can in Pennsylvania that's going to be able to help you or somebody you know.
And I really recommend like Now Matters Now, because they deal with that a lot too, that they have videos, they have tips. There are some good, and speaking of suicide.com, things like that can help too, to help, the person, who's suicidal. But, and if you can be, talk to them about it as much as you can too. But I know it's hard.
Okay, so we have 3:15. I have more questions for you. So you want to hold
Um,
off on them, or you want to go and finish off slides, or?
I think let's do the questions. If we have time for the rest, we do. If not, they're gonna get the, hopefully, they'll get the PDFs of the slides anyway. I may just record this, re-record this, and have it so that you'd have a webinar with the slides and things too, and have a video of that available. So why don't we just go on with the questions?
Okay. Gail says, I'm sorry I have to leave for a client. Thanks for the training. I really appreciate you with the online resources, and they would like to see them. Rachel also had another comment. She says that I meant to add, our loved ones often insist they don't want help and will often recoil from anything we say, but it might sound like a suggestion, like the wonderful ones on Now Matters Now. So I guess what she's saying is that so how can we help them when they recoil from the helpful things that we want to say or do say?
You can't. I mean, a person has to ultimately take responsibility for themselves and has to want to be helped. And there are some people, unfortunately, who can't accept that. I mean, I would leave it around and not, if you have something you could print out and have it around so that they can pick it up at their own time, or just, not say you should read this, just have it around casually or something like that, or have it up. And if they happen to see your computer, I would try that tactic. But ultimately, the person has to want to accept help, and you can't force it. And that's, that's just the way it is.
Jennifer asked, do you find meditation helpful?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great stress reliever. It's a great, it's also a tool that, that's been used for centuries, and you figure there's got to be a reason why. And in fact, I had to recognize that one of my problems since with the pandemic is, well, my husband lost his job, and we've been together 24/7 for months now. And we started off 24/7, but I had to learn how to, I wasn't meditating because I felt like I had no alone time. So I had to learn to create a little sanctuary that I could just go off, because he doesn't really care if I say I'm going away for a while. I'm sure he's just as happy. But yeah, it's a great tool to use, a great stress reliever.
Okay, Emma says, where can we go to explain to us the feeling, thoughts, and processing of this subject? I guess other seminars, or I guess that's what she's asking. I'm not sure, but
I'm not either.
Okay. So Emma, if you want to expound on that, please write some more in the Q&A part. Judy asked, do you agree with parents who take the bedroom door off a teen who's just made a recent suicide attempt?
No, I don't. And I understand why. I get it. But for me, feeling trapped is one of my triggers. And when you restrict, and it's a trigger for a lot of people. And so when you restrict someone and so that they have no privacy at all or monitor them, it's counterproductive. So I understand it. I understand why you want to do it and things, but I think everybody has a right to their own privacy. And if you can just make the houses or her room, you can check the room, make sure it's safe, no Tylenol or drugs or alcohol or pills or knives or whatever, but I still think that I would not recommend that personally.
Okay, I think that finishes up our questions. So if anybody has any more questions, please write in. Heidi, just so you know, David writes, thank you very, very much. Heidi and Govan, I have to leave now, but this was likely the best webinar I've ever been a part of, so thank you again. So you're getting great feedback. Edie mentions mental health partnerships offer a 10-week workshop for family members of people with depression, bipolar disorder, and borderline PD, which include information about suicide prevention. Do you know anything about mental health partnerships at all?
Not mental health partnerships, no. I know about like NAMI Family and the Mental Health Association, but that one I don't know, but it sounds great.
Okay. Yeah, if anybody has time to take a 10-week course, then yeah, please do.
So yeah, the only other things I was going to talk about was resilience, just so people know, resilience, and then just some communication tips. So that's really all I was going to say, and just the importance of self-care. So.
Jennifer asked, what's your opinion on inpatient therapy, voluntary or involuntary?
Well, I'll always opt for voluntary first. Involuntary, it really has, I think, should be the absolute last resort. I mean, there has been a lot of evidence that shows it can actually be harmful, depending on how it is. So, but there are times if that's all you got, that's all you got. So, but I always think it's better if it can be, voluntary rather than forced on you.
I'd agree with that. Having done putting several people, helping people get into treatment is great if you can. And obviously, it's a lot easier if it's voluntary because they want to be there. Involuntary sometimes causes maybe distrust for the person that put them in there. And it's a harder road to go. However, I really want to emphasize that if you think if someone's told you that they're suicidal, if someone told you they had a plan, if someone told you the means to do it, if someone told you that, when they're going to do it, then you need to tell somebody else and you need to get them help, whether they want to go or not. Because I've had many instances of people saying, I hate you, Govan, for putting me involuntary in a treatment center. However, I've never had anyone then die in the aftermath of getting out, that they've all learned how to, have a better support system of where to go to, of how to get help in the future. And some that have thanked me profusely for doing what they needed to do, but they couldn't do themselves. So it's about doing the right thing. And I learned it all from the person over here who, she's the one who trained me on how to, make a difference in people's lives and save people's lives. So Heidi, I thank you enough, because it's that ripple effect that we all give people. So what we learn, or we train you to learn, is how to save people's lives, and therefore that ripple effect, as Heidi talked about earlier, then throws down to all of you into making a difference and saving people's lives as well. So we really thank you for, being here today.
And in a lot of like rural areas, that's the only recourse is, to hospitalize and do so forcibly. I mean, sometimes that's just the only recourse. But like Govan said, if it saves their lives, that's, people, will eventually, for the most part, get over being angry. But, and you'll get over them being angry with you, but you won't get over the guilt and how you feel if you did nothing and they die. That'll stay with you forever.
Rachel writes, based on experience with our loved ones who would lose trust in us and the evidence you cited and the hospital not helping, we've decided not to call the police and 302 them. Also, I've read the most likely time to make an attempt is after being 302'd. Heidi, what do you think of our decision?
I think that's a brave decision. I hope you have resources to help yourselves and everyone, like maybe a crisis center that the person can call, if they need to. But I think that sounds like a good idea. I mean, it sounds like you researched it, you know what you're doing what you feel is best for the person. And I applaud it. I think it's a brave decision to make.
A lot of thank yous. Are there therapists who specialize in suicidality?
There are therapies. So there should be therapists who do. There's collaborative assessment and management of suicidality, or CAMS. And that's become more popular. So I think you could ask if they're aware of that. There's there's a short like cognitive behavioral therapy that Greg Brown developed. There's a cognitive therapy that Craig Bryan, no relation, developed. Trying to think. I think there's another one. So there are therapies specific to suicide that now, I don't know if all the therapists have been made aware of it, but I know CAMS you can do online, and more people are becoming aware of that. So there should be therapy.
Ask, if you're going to therapy, ask what they know. Ask what they know about suicidality. Are they aware of CAMS? And what do they know about suicide? Don't just settle for somebody just to go to somebody. Go to somebody that you have to do a little bit of research for. And we'll try to find something and maybe put it on Facebook on where, try to find people who are specialized in PA with suicidality. That's hard because I don't know of a lot that advertise in a sense of their expertise in suicidality. So,
but on the other hand, there are virtual therapy sessions, and especially now there's even more. So I would also, that's also another avenue, is telepsychiatry and finding someone that way. You probably would have a better chance. CAMS has a website, CAMS, Collaborative Assessment and Management of Suicide. So they probably would have therapists, they might know of therapists in the area, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I will look up that website and then possibly, and I think they do. So we had David Jobs actually in a year or two ago, and I think he mentioned that he has a list of therapists, I think, throughout the country that he might be able to recommend. So let's see, DBT therapists specialize in suicide prevention. Yeah. That's what somebody wrote. Eden wrote. You're getting still love from Mark Davis over and over again of all the things that you've worked for with LGBT community. and that you're a great ally.
Thank you,
Everybody's
Mark.
saying the very really informative. Mark, I am not on the beach itself, and I'm not showing off. It's just a virtual background. I
He's
know, I'm
kidding.
sorry. Um, Joe, as a police officer, unless the consumer makes a direct statement to us, we always tell them it's up to the family. It's up to them to do the 302 or not. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
It can be done if the police officer hears a statement themselves, but we always like the family to be involved if they're supportive of the person or not. But thank you for your comment. And I think that's it. I think that's all the questions.
Okay, then I guess then it's 3:30 for you. So
That's right, you're an hour behind.
right. So
Are you all? One more question here from Mark. Are you all affiliated with How Are You Really? A promising coalition of groups started by designer Kenneth Cole. Check it out. I am not involved. I did hear about that, but I am not affiliated with How Are You Really? Heidi, have you heard of it?
no, I've heard of it, but I am not affiliated. But that's a good, yeah. I should
It is about looking and at other groups and other methods. It's all what works for the individual. It all works for us as survivors or those which work for law survivors. Again, don't stop looking. And if you're stuck, shoot us an email. We'll try to help you every way possible. Because if you shoot me an email for Prevent Suicide PA, sometimes I'm going to shoot that to Heidi and say, Heidi, what do you know? So we will, attempt to find an answer. But if someone's in a crisis, please, please, please call the National Suicide Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 and or the crisis text line and text 741-741. Those are the immediate crisis lines which you should be reaching out to. And somebody writes, Amy writes, if I receive 1/8 of the compliments that you have, I would be extremely lucky. You've made such a difference in people's lives.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's a great way to end on that.
Yeah, thank you. That's thank you. I appreciate that.
So I think a lot of people did ask. We're gonna again send the slides to the people that that asked for them, and we'll also maybe put up just maybe a slide on the resources. I think a lot of people really want to know the resources that you mentioned, Heidi.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of, we'll figure something out. Maybe a link to like Dropbox or something too that has some resources and information. And I'm in the next day or two, I am gonna re-record this with the slides, and so that we have that video that people can watch. And yeah, well, yeah.
We will keep you informed. So please follow us on Prevent Suicide PA, our Facebook page, on our website. We have a Twitter page as well. We're going to get you, and in fact, what we'll do, how about if we just send the information to everybody who signed up. And then you'll know where to go and how to find the re-recorded webinar, this webinar, if you want to see that, which was fantastic, obviously, and resources where you can go to get some help if needed. So,
yeah, sounds good.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay,
we really
thank you, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
And I asked Heidi actually last week, and hopefully what we plan to do is hopefully like a quarterly webinar. So so hopefully you all come back. So again, thanks for being on. Thanks for doing all the good work that you do out there. I know I can speak for Heidi and say that we really appreciate you being here and doing all that fantastic work and saving lives out there. And if you're struggling, you're not alone, and we love you. So please reach out for help if needed. And any last words, Heidi?
No, you said it all. It was great what you just said. So I would echo what you said.
Bye, everybody. Love you guys.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.